Firewalls are the next step up to protect you. The routers have very rudimentary ability to filter traffic, which is not really to stop attacks. It's just to not waste your time on traffic that isn't important, really. Firewalls are the thing that are really there to stop attacks. So the idea is to control access. Most firewalls, unfortunately, filter only traffic coming in. Egress filtering is so important, I think, is best common practice 38 on the internet. There are RFCs, which are the protocols, and there's best common practices, which are recommendations. And everyone should do egress filtering. When packets leave your network, you should filter them. Like if you're City College and any packet leaves, any packet that has a from address that is not 147, 144 something should be thrown away because it's lying. We are the college. Everything should leave with a from address from the college. Every email should have a from address from the college. This would stop people from sending spam. When you send spam, you lie about the from address, and egress filtering is the only point you can do it, because once it gets out on the internet, so it's hopping around like Sprint and Comcast, they have no way to tell where it came from, so it could have any address and they wouldn't know it was wrong. But at the exit from your network, you do know what all the valid from addresses are. The problem is, this is recommended, but it is anti-capitalist. If you spend money configuring egress filtering, you prevent your company from attacking someone else. So you waste your money to save other people. It doesn't do you any good. So it is contrary to economic fiscal responsibility to waste your time on egress filtering. Yeah?
There is one small thing, though, is that you lower your value as a target. So attackers will be more likely to attack someone else, because if they hack you, they can use you for their botnet. Yeah,
that's a good idea. That might pass, get some money out of the board of directors. That's a good idea. Anyway, public institutions like colleges do it. Private institutions typically don't. But anyway, firewalls do have the ability to do egress filtering, but it's usually turned off. So a hardware firewall sits on the edge of a network and handles all the traffic for many machines, and it runs really fast, running at line speed. And for a while, the old versions of hardware firewalls were not able to maintain sessions. So this was called a stateless firewall. It had to judge each packet individually, and it did not know the history. So now modern firewalls can in fact do much more. Layer 7, and they can maintain sessions and everything else. But the point is, again, they're typically configured to filter incoming traffic only. And this is where it does a cursory examination of traffic to remove things that are obviously useless. And then when you go in the network, this avoids wasting the bandwidth of your internal equipment on packets that are no good anyway. Then on each machine, you typically have a software firewall too, like the Windows firewall, or you can put on third-party things like Komodo. And for some ungodly reason, these things like to pop up alerts for the end user. Now, I don't know what idiot thought of this and who thinks this does any good, because nobody knows what the answer to a question like this is. Firefox wants to connect on port 1121 and 127.0.0.1. You know, how many end users do you think know what you're talking about and whether to say yes or no? What happens is, there have been a lot of studies. When you pop up stupid boxes that no one can understand, they just swat them off the screen like flies. They hit a random button to make it go away. I'm trying to read my email. What is this crap? They close this. And then tomorrow they can't read their email. They call tech support. My computer doesn't work. And they say, what did you do? I didn't do anything. Well, these stupid boxes popped up and I got rid of them, but I didn't know what they said. And so I don't know why you would pass this on to the end user, but for some reason they like to do that. So software firewalls have configuration problems in the form of the end user clicking yes and no randomly until the rules are all messed up. And they also rely on the OS. So if there's no OS exploit that takes over the OS, you can turn off the firewall. And there's quite a few exploits. Metasploit has modules to kill the firewall process, and it's a fairly common thing that kill the antivirus process. These are fairly strong targets for malware for obvious reasons. So there's other things firewalls do. And we'll go through a few of these. One of the main ones, network address translation, is a really useful thing, so many people could share one internet connection. And typically you do it with port address translation. It is possible to do without port address translation, but almost nobody does it that way because you don't save money. What you want is this. You want to have a router where you pay for one public address and one Comcast line or something, and then you have many machines share that one Comcast line. This is what everybody has at home, what most companies have. So if this machine opens up a browser, it might be on port 1100, and this one would also be on 1100, another browser on port 1103, and they get mapped to the same public address up there and different port numbers that have nothing to do with these. So the IP address has been translated, 192.168.1.101 has turned into 147.144.21, and the port has been translated to one of those, 1201, 1202, or 1203. So the external world, like my ISP, thinks I have one machine with 3 windows open. But I actually have 2 machines with 2 windows on this one and 1 window on that one, and they will never know. And this saves you money, and it is considered a security measure because nobody can run an unauthorized server. Suppose I want to run a web server. I configure IIS, and I put up a web page here. Nobody can see it except people inside the company, because anybody outside the company can only go to the public address and port 80 on this device, and they will only get to the official web server where port forwarding has been configured by the administrator. So anybody controlling a machine down here that is not the administrator of the firewall cannot run any unauthorized servers at all. And this also stops a whole lot of multiplayer games. And if you, as home users know, if you want to play games, you have to keep configuring port forwarding in your router, or put your one machine in the DMZ so it gets unfiltered direct traffic. Anyway, that's the game here. And I've got these private addresses down here. So you can have access control lists. Again, you can sort, you can filter things by the same thing other routers do, IP, ports and services, protocol, and you can filter them on other things. You can filter them by what program they're touching at the other end. And so on, these are simple packet filtering. Now, stateful packet inspection is something where it understands history. Every machine has a state table. So if I open up my command prompt here, and then I make a connection to something like here's Microsoft Imagine, so I'll refresh that page. So now I have renewed my connection to this on the hub website. So if I do netstat -an pipe more, you'll see that I have connections. My local address is 147.144. This is my local port number, which is a huge number like 61,000. The huge numbers are used for ephemeral ports. It's my end of a connection that will be used only for a few minutes and then forgotten. Here's the public port, 443. That's an HTTPS server. So I have an established connection, which means I have done the SYN, ACK, and I'm transferring data, and I have not yet canceled it with a fin or a reset. So this is an established connection. Here's one that is timing out. I haven't used it in a while. It's on its last ACK. Here's one that is waiting to close, and on it goes. This thing is called the state table. And this state table does not depend on one packet. It depends on the history of a series of packets. And a stateful firewall can use the port number, the direction, the protocol, the IP address, and the state to decide whether to take it. And the most common arrangement is what Microsoft has for their firewall, which is if you go to a public location with a Microsoft Windows machine with the Windows firewall, it will let you do anything you want. You can send anything you want out. And if you send a SYN out to any server, it will take the SYN ACK and send the ACK and let all the traffic through that you asked for. But if anything comes in from the outside, like to access your shared folders, it will throw it away, which means you can be a client but not a server. This is an extremely powerful security measure, and the end result is an unpatched, vulnerable machine with this turned on will last a year connected to the internet. When you turn off the firewall, they get infected within a day. So that's quite effective, and it's what you want in a public network. Even if I have games and shared folders and BitTorrent and everything on my machine, I don't want it connecting when I'm in the public network except what I ask for. Other people can't use me as a server. That's stateful packet inspection. All right, and actually there's the state table, and so it can look at the state table, so it'll allow anything to come in if it's an established connection, but not if it isn't. And established connections can only come from the inside when I asked for it, which is why you use reverse shells all the time. When you take over machines with Metasploit, a forward shell would be sending a SYN from the outside. A reverse shell is tricking the target into asking me to please control it, and that works much better because a stateful firewall lets that through and it blocks the other one. Now, if you actually have a stateless firewall, which is not that common anymore, it forgets everything. Now, when you make a TCP connection, like to download a file, you send a SYN, SYNAC, ACK, then you send a request, then the server sends you several bytes, several packets of data, and then you send an acknowledgement. And several packets of data, then you send an acknowledgement. Then I have something to say, like I'm requesting the next movie, so I send a few packets and it sends an acknowledgement. So TCP connections have a steady chain of ACKs going both ways all the time. And if my firewall doesn't have any memory, it has to let all the ACKs through. Because for all it knows, those ACKs are part of an established session. So you can use ACKs to get through firewalls because it can't block them. And now so you can send an ACK and the firewall will let it through. The problem is ACKs don't usually provoke any response of any kind. So it's kind of hard to tell that your ACK got through. But what you do, there's used to be a tool called Firewalk that did this. And you can do it very easily in Scapy. You send an ACK with a very small TTL. So, for example, if you hit a powerful firewall like this one here, if I do traceroute to www.nsa.gov, these are guys that are probably not messing around. So what you'll find is it'll have been a few hops to get near there. Here's on the City College network. And we'll see how far this works. Let me start another one in case this one is like going to frustrate me. Start another one up here somewhere simpler, like say Google. Trace route. All right, this one will hopefully be less protected, but it is quite common that when you go, you'll make a few hops towards it, and then you'll hit something that's filtering out the replies. Now, it looks like the City College wireless network might be filtering everything out. So let me just get my iPad up. Oh, I don't have my iPad. That's disconcerting. Well, anyway, hopefully I left it at home and not somewhere stupider. But anyway, if you hit a firewall, like this, here I've hit a firewall, I could probe a couple of hops past that firewall by changing my TTL to 3. Then it will only make 3 hops and then die, and that router will send an ICMP13 packet discarded message to me, and those are rarely blocked. So I send something in this direction, only a couple of hops past the firewall, and then I get a reply, so I can find out a little bit, what's a hop or two past the firewall with this kind of trick with an ACK. And that's a trick to get through firewalls, an old trick. But like I say, it's not that important anymore because most people are using stateful firewalls now. But if they aren't, you can do ACK scans. Yeah?
What kind of information can you get from an ACK scan?
You can get the IP address of things 1 or 2 hops past the firewall, if you're lucky, with the TTL, and that's pretty much about it, because normally ACKs provoke no response, although technically, if you have a Unix system, I think an ACK is supposed to apply, you're supposed to get a reset to an ACK on a closed port. So you might get some resets back, but typically not much. Anyway, that's stateful packet inspection. Yeah?
For getting the IP address, would you only be able to get if it's a public IP, or would it also give you the private IP that is behind that?
I think you'll only get a public IP, because a private IP cannot send anything on the internet without going through network address translation. You can only see public IPs from the outside. The only way to get private IPs is to compromise your machine and then pivot, where you actually originate your scans inside. And this is why that's such an important technique. You have to take over something you can see, put your attack kit on that, and attack further from there, because now you're inside the network. All right, these are good questions. Anyway, so an application layer firewall can look at the whole packet, including layer 7, and therefore it can detect things that are on the wrong port, because there's really no reason to run anything on the right port. It's supposed to be port 23 for telnet and port 80 for websites, but you could totally put telnet on port 80, and it would work. So you need to actually look at the structure of the packet to block it, and that's layer 7 firewalls. So if you have only one firewall protecting you from the internet, that's relatively dangerous. What most people recommend is a DMZ, where you have layers of security. This is defense in depth. So you'll have the internet unfiltered going to your web and email server, and a firewall protecting your internal network. Now that's one way to do it, but what's more common is 2 firewalls. You have one firewall here that blocks out terrible stuff like DDoS attacks, but it lets everybody get to the web server and email server. And then you have another firewall here that is much more conservative and typically requires you to prove you're really a company employee with a name and password or something to get into the internal network, where the real goodies are, like credit card numbers and confidential documents and stuff. And that's what you typically do. That's defense in depth, where you have layers of security. So ASA is one of the popular firewalls. It was PIX before that. And it has its own characteristic prompt, and it has its own language you have to learn to program it. And one of the huge problems with these is there is no cheap simulator. There's no VMware version, there's no packet tracer simulator. You pretty much have to buy one for $500 to learn how to use them, which is annoying, but that's what people do. And you can specify access lists for the firewall and so on, sort of in a language like other devices. You can group objects and filter them by group, sort of like Active Directory groups. And there are tools out there to help you get standard configurations for your firewalls for typical situations. There's websites you can go to download these. The government has recommendations, and other companies have them. And that's often how you start. And then there's this thing called continuous compliance monitoring, which is pretty hot these days. This is not the same as security monitoring. It's compliance monitoring, where you're knowing if someone is changing things without authorization. So it is just checking to make sure your rules have not been altered through your network, and that's what you get with a compliance tool. All right, so I got a few iClickers about that, and then there's some more stuff. So, which one is your first line of defense? Removing the stuff that is just obviously malicious. All right, looks like I can quit at 25. All right, it's typically a hardware firewall protecting your whole network, We have two Palo Alto and two of another brand here protecting us. All right. So what device presents you with a message like that? I'll quit at 25. It's a software firewall, and unlike most of them, at least has this. We recommend that you allow it to connect. That's nicer than most of them. All right, I don't know who thought of this system. Anyway, all right, which one of these is vulnerable to an ACK scan? Quit at 25. All right, and that is a stateless firewall. Yeah, that's the kind that will be fooled by ACKs. All right, so then there's the next step up from a firewall is an IDS or an IPS. This is more like a firewall combined with antivirus on the network. So not only does it look through the entire packet, it looks through series of packets and reassembles things like files to look for signatures in there and know if they're malicious. And it has a whole list of signatures to match. So it's going to pick nasty things off the network by recognizing them off a list of known bad things. You can have a network-based IDS, which is going to be connected with a hub or preferably a network tap, which will take a copy of every packet that's headed for the switch and send a copy over here, and this device will tell you if it's malicious. Now an IDS strictly does not prevent anything, it just records it. And it might send you an alert, but it's just a detection system, like a security camera. You now know that there's an attack in progress, but it doesn't stop it. You can have a host-based IDS also, where it lives on one server and it's protecting that one server, and then it has more information because it can look at the logs on the server. And that's what something like Tripwire does, is checking the integrity of the system on one server and tells you when that one server got hacked. So a passive IDS is the one that just sends out an alert and logs it when it finds bad things, and an active system is something that tries to stop the attack in progress, typically by adding a firewall rule to block something from an IP address or something like that. And this is what Bro does. This is what they use at the Lawrence Berkeley Labs. They use Bro, which is their own IDS, and that's all they use, no standard firewall at all. And Bro detects any attack, and if anybody sends a certain number of attack packets, their IP address gets blocked for half an hour, and that's all they do. And they say that is fantastically effective at stopping attacks. Anyway, that's the game here. You can buy a bunch of them, buy them from Cisco, McAfee. Snort is the most common open source IDS system, and there's a bunch of them. And all right, then, however, in 2009, the walls came down. All this stuff existed. Companies would spend about $100,000 buying all these systems, and then they all got hacked. And this made them very disgruntled. This was the Aurora attack in December of 2009. Google detected traffic leaving their network, going to China in an unauthorized way. They said, why is all our stuff going to China? And they looked and they found it was their confidential data, so they took the IP address where it was going and they hacked into that server and stole it back. And they found Microsoft files, Adobe files, everybody else's data on that server too, which is typically what the FBI does. This is why the most common thing at companies is they get hacked and they never notice until 2 years later. And the only reason they ever notice is because the FBI comes to them and tells them, we found your data on a server for somebody else that was smarter than you, who actually monitors their network, like Google. And Google then contacted Adobe and Microsoft and said, hey dudes, the Chinese hacked you too, and you didn't even notice. And Google was right at this time expanding into China. And they took it very personally. The Chinese were hacking them right while they were negotiating with the government, moving in, supposedly helping the Chinese economy. They got very, very angry, and they went public, which had never happened. The Chinese had been doing this for 5 years, and everybody in the business knew, but nobody admitted it publicly until these guys were the first ones to get mad enough to kick over the can and just let the whole world find out China was stealing everything from America, which they totally were and totally still are. So this was the sequence. They were very embarrassed. Google engineers were using Internet Explorer 6. So one of the many things in the aftermath is, why don't you people use Chrome? And they did switch to Chrome after this because that was pretty embarrassing. Then somebody used IE6 and went to a website and got an exploit which took over their machine, loaded malware on, of course. So now the malware called home to a local command and control server, and then they elevated privileges to administrator on the local system with a Windows exploit. Then they found the Active Directory database and cracked it and got credentials. Then they used the credentials to get VPN access, and then they owned the network, and so they put all sorts of fantastic malware on their system. They would package up stuff and send it out in small kits to China. They even put time bombs on the network. They put malware that would just sit there and wake up like a month later when you think it's clean and start sending stuff back to China. They put ones that will wait up to 3 years before waking up because they're not messing around. They're the Chinese military. They're seriously stealing these secrets. They are not playing games. This is not anonymous. This is serious military activity. So once they get in, they want to stay in. And that's why they call them the advanced persistent threat. This is what created this buzzword. It's a Navy term, but this is when somebody is not just trying to break in and steal data now, they are trying to establish a permanent spy on your network so they can mess with you for years. And that's what governments want, but it's not what typical criminal gangs want. They just want to steal some credit card numbers and leave, and go sell them and have money. But this is what espionage people want. They want a permanent traitor in you inside your company that will leak secrets to them in perpetuity. So this is what they recommended to present this, which sounded impossible and daunting to me when I first heard this in like 2010, and now this sounds much more reasonable to me. This is why they're hiring so many of us and we're teaching these classes, because everybody now has to have a whole team of security engineers protecting the network. So you got to inspect your DNS traffic, have network monitoring, so you're watching everything that happens on your network and noticing how bad it is, watching the inbound and the outbound traffic and the logs, having VPN and malware scanning, looking for rootkits, have a security operations team. You have to have an incident response team that can cope with this. It's a whole lot of security experts you need at your company, and that's the way it's really going. So it's job.
Viruses? After the FBI went to that IP address, anybody plant any viruses from the US side?
Not that I heard of. Although the entire Google operation was completely illegal, and I talked to a Secret Service agent, and they said they told Google not to do it, and they said, your opinion has been noted, we're hacking the Chinese back, and because there is no law, there's no court, but technically, it's just the Wild West. You could totally do that. There is a school of active attacks. I've heard it. People have said this. They said what you should do is you should put viruses on your network, and then when people steal your stuff, they get infected.
Yes.
There are people doing that, but I don't think Google did that. But there are people doing that and writing special things to do that. Like the FBI did that to the pedophiles. There was a Tor pedophile site. They couldn't find the server, so they hacked into it and put malware on it, so all the pedophiles would install the malware, which would then call the FBI and say, come arrest me. And that worked. The only problem is you can't get a search warrant that authorizes that because you don't even know who you're hacking. You don't even know what country they're in. So a judge actually wrote them a warrant giving them the right to conduct electronic surveillance on anybody anywhere. And now that they're trying to prosecute them, they're saying, wait a minute. No judge has the jurisdiction and the authority to write you a search warrant like that, so this evidence doesn't count, and they're currently screaming and yelling about that. It's a problem. Anyway,
I found one program that's monitoring the DNS traffic, but it's hard to configure. I might need your help.
Sure. But you can just do it with TCP now. Anyway, like I say, we are going to have a class in network security monitoring in about a year because it is a big issue, and the main product people use is Security Onion in the open source community if you don't want to spend the money to buy those expensive proprietary ones. But you do need to be monitoring your network these days. So then there's honeypots, another questionable, controversial issue. So a honeypot is where you put something up just hoping it will get hacked. Now, there are some pretty good reasons to do this. One of the simplest ones is you're an antivirus company and you want to harvest viruses to put them in your antivirus definitions. So you put up a bunch of vulnerable machines and then set them automatically clicking links all over the internet or something until they get hacked, and then you sample the virus. That's fine. That's one reason to do it. Another more controversial issue is you actually add this to your network to hopefully distract attackers. Mandiant, who is the experts of this and the people that analyze the Chinese APT threat and everything else, the books they've written, in a 121 class we're talking about this, he says, this is stupid. He said, before you waste your time setting up something, hoping it will get hacked and claiming that makes you safe, tell me you really put on all the patches and changed all your passwords. You did the basic stuff you should be doing. I highly doubt that your expenditure of time and money on honeypots is at all rewarding in terms of security compared to actually bothering to make sure you did the basics. But anyway, it is an option. It's out there, and Microsoft even wrote a patent for a home honeypot to put on your home network, but they aren't selling it yet. And I'm skeptical that that will turn out to be a valuable investment, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, so the honeypot appears to have something important on it, so hackers will spend time attacking it, and that gives you time to detect the attack and swing your incident response team into action, supposedly. And you can buy them and you can get them free. There's HoneyD is a common one that appears to be a server. You can also have them up to real entire virtual machines that really have the OS on them. I think they got anonymous at one of these. One of the big anonymous hacks in 2012 was that they got the FBI director's email and they dumped it on Pastebin, and I downloaded it and read through it, and it was so dull. There was thousands of emails, incredibly boring, like, let's move this meeting from Thursday to Friday. Just nothing of the slightest interest in there. I think it was a honeypot. I think it was, no one could be that dull. I think it was there to make them waste their time downloading it. But anyway, HoneyD is a common one. This happened in a capture the flag contest about 6 months ago. I was doing this, and they had this server, and you try to log in, and you guess the password, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you get in. And then when you get in, you do these Linux commands, you couldn't figure it out. And one of the students, I think Tom and I were the ones spending like 3 hours trying to hack this server, and it would drive you nuts. You do ls and see these folders. When you try to go in the folder's not there. You see this program, you try to run it, it's not there. It was a honeypot. That's HoneyD. HoneyD looks like Linux, but it's only about 1 inch deep. It appears to have files, but only like 3 commands work, and the other commands just don't work, and you think you've lost your mind. But anyway, one of the students actually noticed you could find out what version of Linux was, and it was like 6 years out of date, and he Googled it, and that's the HoneyD honeypot. Anyway, we didn't think of that. Anyway, so then that's like a virtual honeypot like HoneyD, doesn't even a whole computer. It just looks like a computer for the first couple of exchanges of packets. And then there's honeypot and HoneyNet out there. This is one that, HoneyNet is one that Matthew Prince set up before he set up Cloudflare to catch spammers. In the invisible part of your web page, in HTML comments, you would put addresses, and then you'd join this club, and they would automatically add these addresses to your page and monitor your server logs, because they'd put an address in your page and then scan who's viewing your page, and then wait for that address to get spam, and then they can tell who's scanning to steal addresses to send spam. And they collected this data, and this data turned out to be very valuable and really help you discover who's the source of spam and block them, make more effective blacklists of IP addresses. And here's another one here, the New Zealand HoneyNet Alliance. There are a lot of these clubs. In fact, it's so popular that now there's competition and fighting among them. One of the worst ones is Microsoft. Microsoft actually went and got a court order to take down some botnets. They found some command control servers and malware. They took them down, and then after that, all these people started screaming, wait a minute, I already took over that botnet. That was my research project. But Microsoft didn't know, and so it's not where the good guys are shooting the good guys with friendly fire in this world. Anyway, then there's web application firewalls. All these firewalls we talked about will protect you from things like viruses and denial of service attacks, but they will not protect web applications from things like cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery and SQL injection, because that's a whole nother level, sort of beyond layer 7. That's a whole nother level of complexity in the data that is not considered by the people that make these firewalls. So there are special firewalls just to protect web applications. Now, web application vulnerabilities come from errors in coding, but if you ask a company, like you're a manager, and they say, we have a security problem in our web app. You say, okay, what do you want to do? I want to retrain our programmers and rewrite the web app. And he says, well, how long will that take? And how much will it cost? And when will it be done? And I wouldn't want to answer that question. I'm in the business. You teach people, and you ask me, how long before they stop making stupid mistakes? I say, gee, can I really promise that after my course, they're not going to make any more stupid mistakes, or are they sleeping in the back and going to keep making those mistakes? So rather than that, you just buy a box in front of it. Let them continue to write crap, and we'll just buy a box that filters it out, because you know how much that will cost, and you know how long it will take. So that's what you do.
Actually, there was one more thing. Remember, Zone Alarm has the data that sends to their home server, even though you didn't ask for it.
Who does what?
Zone Alarm.
Oh, sure. Well, that's a big issue. All products are spying on you and sending stuff up to the cloud, and especially Windows these days. And various people are screaming and yelling about whether that's okay. Anyway, so you buy a web application firewall or you use a free one, and it now has, just like the other, it has a list of attack signatures for web apps, like SQL injection and cross-site scripting strings, and it blocks them out. They're not terribly effective, but they're better than nothing, and they're gradually improving. And then there's Cloudflare, which protects your server with reverse proxies to where nobody connects to your server anymore directly. They're looking at copies of your server on the Cloudflare servers. So all the traffic goes to them first, where they scrub out the bad stuff, and then they ask for your server to hand over a copy to show them, so nobody's ever touching your server at all. And this was enormously effective. In 2011, the Jester put up a web page, and the Anonymous and LulzSec hunted for him for, I think, 4 months, and they could not find his server. They were scanning the whole internet trying to find it to take it down with their denial of service attacks, but he was hiding behind Cloudflare. Nobody can even find your IP address. All they can see is Cloudflare, copies of your server. So if you do it right, it's a very strong protection. And there's a free version and there's pay versions that give you more. Anyway, so which one of these relies on the computer's OS? All that 2011 hacking was my direct combat with real criminals, and I discovered something that cops knew, which is that they spend 90% of their time attacking other criminals. They're always bickering and forming gangs and feuding and betraying each other. It's nuts, you know. Anyway, their number one issue is to punch other criminals. They only remember to actually steal something from victims rarely. Anyway, all right. So that is a host-based IDS. It runs on the host OS of the server it's protecting, or desktop for that matter. All right, which one tries to trick an attacker and waste their time? Which always sounded kind of bogus to me, and I'm glad to have Kevin Mandia take my side in that, saying this is pretty bogus as a way to protect your network. I'll quit at 25. That's Honeypots for what they're worth. All right. All right. Which one will protect you from SQL injection? I'll quit at 25. All right, and that's a web application firewall. The free one is Mod Security that comes with Apache, and there are many, many paid ones. All right, I'll stop the recording and see who won. This is chapter 13.